In this video, I'll introduce you to the Illustrator workspace and show you some basic tools for drawing in it. First of all, I want to point out this toolbar over here on the left-hand side. This is where you'll find most of the tools that you're going to use for either selecting objects or drawing objects, manipulating them, etc., within Illustrator. And over the course of the next few weeks, you'll become familiar with most of these tools. Over on the right are buttons for what are called panels, and panels are where you have options for editing objects. So for instance, this panel controls the transparency of objects. Here we have options for making gradient fills within objects, an appearance panel that shows us how an object appears, what all the settings are that contribute to that, a stroke panel that controls all the ways that we can draw lines within Illustrator. And it's important to note that you can either click on these little buttons and you'll get used to the icons that are used for these buttons, so you can pretty quickly just say, oh, I want the stroke panel, I'll click on this one. You can also pull these tabs off and then have your panels floating within the workspace so that you have easy access to them and they won't go away on you. You can drag these back in, or you can even have your panels over in this sort of sidebar so that they're always there. The layers panel I like to keep over here in the sidebar so that I know where it is. It has easy access and it's visible with a large amount of space because all of your objects will eventually be shown in that layers panel. Okay, so out here onto the drawing space. This frame right here is what's called an artboard, and it's the space that you have within Illustrator to make your graphic in. I'm just going to show you briefly how to make a new artboard in case you would want to do that. If you go to the File menu and click New, you'll get all these options. You can name your file, which I won't bother with right now. You can even have more than one artboard. We'll stick with one for the time being, and I'm just going to keep it a letter size, which is 8.5 by 11. I've set my units here to inches, so you see that, and then I'll hit OK, and we'll get a new file. And your files show up as tabs along the top here, sort of like in an internet browser. It's easy to navigate between them that way, and so if you want to copy and paste something from one file to another, it's pretty easy to get back and forth. So now we're going to dive into making a really simple graphic. I'm going to come over here and grab the pen tool, which is the most basic of the drawing tools. It basically allows you to make lines by specifying points, and then Illustrator will connect those points, sort of connecting the dots in order to make a line. So I'll just make a point there, and you'll see the vertices displayed as these blue squares with lines connecting them. And if I just am clicking, then it will make a line with a sharp corner. If I click and drag, then I get these whiskers or handles that will allow me to make a curved line and then specify how that's curved, what direction it's curved in, and how much it's curved. And those can be pretty fun to play with, and you've got a lot of flexibility with how to make that curve. And then if I come around to the other side of my object, you'll see that so you can just make a line that's unclosed where the two ends don't match, but if I'm making my line and I come back around and put my pen tool up next to the initial point that I made, you'll see that there's a little circle next to that pen tool, and if I click on that endpoint, then I now have a closed object. That circle tells me that that object that I'm drawing right onto the initial vertex, and there's no break between those 2 points. So now that I've made an object, let me show you how you can select that object. In order to edit it, there are 2 options for selection. The first is the regular selection tool, which is the black arrow up here. And if I click that, I get this bounding box all the way around the object, and I can change the object by clicking and dragging on the different handles of that bounding box. The important point to make here is that I'm changing the object as a whole. I can, if I drag this box, it's going to be distorting the entire shape. Whereas if I come over here and get the white arrow, the direct selection tool, I can directly select just one vertex, and you can see that this vertex is now filled in, and these vertices are white, or have white fill. So I know that this filled one is the one that's active. I've just clicked on it. And I can now click and drag on that and change directly just one part of that object. So the selection tool is designed for changing whole objects, and direct selection is designed for changing just parts of an object. Once I have an object selected, I'm going to go grab the selection tool and get the whole thing as one. I can then change properties of that object, like, for instance, the width of the line that is being drawn here. This is a black line, and it looks like it's about 1 point in width. If I come over to the stroke panel with that object selected, I get a lot of options for how I want to draw that stroke, and we'll go into that in greater detail in further videos. But for the time being, let's just focus on this weight option right here. If I go and change that to 4 point, then we get a much darker line, a much thicker line, excuse me. I could even crank it up to 8 points, and I can move up and down. I can nudge that number up and down with these little arrows, which is pretty handy. I can also change, if I have that object selected, the color of that stroke. You'll see over here in the corner there's an option for the fill color, which is the color inside of that object, and for the stroke color, which is the color of the line around it. If I click on the stroke, it comes to the forefront, and now if I change the color up here on the color panel, it's affecting the color of that stroke. So I can make that sort of a mid-tone gray. I can also double click on the stroke swatch right there, and it'll give me this color picker, and then I can choose any number of colors. We're going to try to stick with black and white for the time being, so I'll choose a mid-tone gray right there. While we're here, I'll show you that if you click on this button in the upper right hand corner of the color panel, you get all these options for different color models, and CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and that's a color model used by a lot of printing presses. I can just select grayscale here, and then I only have one slider, and that's a handy way of keeping us in the grayscale realm. Okay, the other thing I can do, obviously, is select the fill down here in the lower left. If I double click on that, I get options for fill, and I'll make that sort of a dark gray. And now you can see that the shape has been filled in with a dark gray color. And it's pretty easy to select colors there. I can also select none for a fill or for a stroke. You can see nothing happened because I didn't have this object selected. I'll just click on it. You'll see the blue selection, and then once I select fill and none, it'll go back to having no fill in the center there. Finally, I'm going to show you how to just navigate around your artboard a little bit easier than if you were to come down here and grab the pan tool or the zoom tool independently. If you're doing a lot of moving around and editing, it can get pretty tiresome to have to come down here and click every time you want to move around your space. And that's why you can actually use keyboard shortcuts in order to initialize the panning or the zooming functions, and these are very, very handy. So say that I'm here with the pen tool and I'm drawing away on a line, and I decide that I really need to move my entire space to the right. All I have to do is push and hold the space bar, and my cursor will become the hand tool for the time that I'm holding that space bar down. So I can move around, and then as soon as I let go, I'm right back to the pen tool and I can keep drawing. I can do the same thing with zooming tools by holding the spacebar and the control button to zoom in. So I'm holding space and control, and now I have that zoom cursor, and I can zoom in either by clicking or by drawing a box. And then by holding the space, the control, and the alt button, I get the zoom out, and now I can zoom back out of the page. You'll get very used to using those so that you can just quickly get around on the page without having to come down here for the tools all the time.